Hi everybody. Welcome
If
back
you-
this week. We're here with a little special guest. Show our special guest, Lynn.
Hello.
Look,
I have to keep her with us because she wants to be outside because lash and rain to eat all the worms and then she'll be destroyed. So
I'm bringing all the muck in.
yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly what she does. And I like that jump up on the good couches and yeah, lounge with her filth. So she's here.
Hi, Penny. She's going to be very insightful and help us digress.
Yeah, yeah. She's going to absorb all the self-talk, the topic of
Yeah.
talk,
Yeah.
and yeah, the importance of self-talk for internal conflict.
Yeah, so we were looking at internal conflict, and now we're just going to delve into the importance of self-talk in general, in like just in general. Self-talk, how we speak to ourselves. Why is it so important?
Because we're always talking to ourselves, right? Literally. So why
Yeah,
would it be important?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that internal dialogue is always there, even if we don't know it. It's constantly on.
Yeah, if we're not aware of it, it is because that's what the mind does. It's the activity of the mind, and it's just always running some sort of a dialogue. So why not redirect it into good quality and form to serve us?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so important what we say to ourselves, like how we speak to ourselves. Like what we say really does matter, doesn't it?
It's the everything. Like when you said that, yeah, it's the everything. Of course, it matters. If I sit here and I think, oh, I had such a terrible day, I don't have my shit together. Why does it always end up like this? Why are my days always so stressful? What don't I do right? Why don't I ever get it right? Why is life like this? It's just like this kind of like heavy negative.
Energy. Yeah, yeah. And it invites in more of the same. And like science has proven that now, haven't they? Like focus energy flows where focus goes. So if your focus is constantly on the negative or the victimhood or the problem, then you seem to get more of the same. That's what happens. It just keeps on coming, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. Because it's your mind and body is orientated to that. And you're saying, this is the reality. This is
Mm.
what it is. And therefore, your mind and body knows no difference. So that's what it creates because you think it, you feel it, you respond to it, and that's your reality.
Mm.
So it's
And
like
it's a
that.
loop.
Exactly. Yeah. That's self-fulfilling prophecy that it's just the brain speaks to the body gets the message. The message says, yeah, I hear you. I hear your vibe. I hear your tone. I hear your attitude. And it feeds back to the brain. The brain goes, yeah, that's it. And it's just this
Mm.
perpetuating heavy vibe and attitude about ourselves and the
Mm.
world and
And
others.
then that's the story. Like that's, I mean, because not none of it's real either. Like it's not real. Like who was it, Dr. Joe Dispenza that said, like, tell your story and then realize that 50% of it or more is just completely fabricated and made up from your past. It just keeps adding legs, like it keeps growing legs, I suppose. So it's about like having the power to change that story. Then why keep recycling the same story over and over again? And isn't it true as well, like he says, you wake up in the morning and you just recreate the same pattern of thoughts you had yesterday. Like, you know, the 60,000 thoughts, I think 60 to 90,000 a day that we have, he reckons that like 80% of them are the same thoughts we had the day before. So it's about upgrading that story, changing that story, like, like that, and like making it more positive, making it more beneficial, isn't it?
Yeah, aligning to it, allowing that self-talk to be aligned with a story that we desire, as opposed to the repetition of what has been just replaying, what has been programmed or computed, or what has been downloaded into us. Because there was never any stories there to begin with, right? We just come into this world in pure joy, bliss, innocence, go, go, gaga, what's going on? We have no clue.
Yeah.
Then we have experiences and then we perceive them a certain way based on our limitation. And then it just becomes a story. And that story just becomes like our identity, our way of being, our way of knowing. And it goes on, rinse and repeat until one day we're like,
Yeah,
I can't.
change the rhetoric. And that's changed the talk, isn't it? Change the way you talk to yourself. Like if we can talk to ourselves so negatively and have that same cycle of like nothing ever changing, then what do? Change the way you speak to yourself. That's the, especially for the internal conflict, it's kind of like, well, are you going to add to the conflict? It's like having a fight with yourself if you keep throwing the negative crap on top of it, isn't it? It's like piling it up. So what would you do in a relationship with a friend or a family member? You try and find a solution. So why don't you find the solution with yourself by talking to yourself in a positive way, in a more loving, caring, appreciative like way, compassionate way.
Simple, right?
Hmm?
Seems so simple.
Yeah, but it is like that's the maddest thing. It is that simple.
I know.
You know, it's kind of, it does, I suppose it's like when you're in that cycle, it's very difficult, but it's trying to break free. And how do you break free? It's on repeat. Like it's you, as you said, rinse and repeat, but rinse and repeat and do something different. Change the way you speak to yourself, isn't that? Do you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's, it's simple because that's all it is. It's like, what way am I speaking to myself? I don't like it. Flip it.
Mm.
It does take
Conscious action.
attention. Yeah.
Mm.
And it does take us to be aware of the nature of the self-talk that's there, because if we are not aware of it, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, because a lot of it's subconscious. You're right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
become.
And the
Yeah.
subconscious is the emotional mind. So, like you said, Aoife, it's like a story and we replay it over and over again. So, the part that you said was that it keeps on just building momentum and intensity and new versions of the same thing. And then it has so much momentum and intensity going. That's why sometimes it feels so hard to do, just
Mm.
because it's built up over the days, over the weeks, over the months, over the years to be the current reality. And that's why sometimes it feels like when I work a lot with people, they're like, no, I can't control it. Like, I don't have any power over it. Like, it's got the power.
Mm.
And that's true in the sense that that's how you feel in that moment.
It
But
feels
that's
so
not,
abnormal, isn't it? Because
it,
it's so familiar to be that way. Do you know?
it feels so abnormal.
Yeah, to just flip it.
Yes. Oh,
For
yeah,
your
yeah.
clients, like,
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because when you go to flip it, you've got a system there that thinks it needs to keep you the same to protect you. So it's going to even have you have talk towards your intention to change your self-talk, and have things like, oh no, it doesn't work, it's too hard, what's the point, it doesn't even make sense, like, so it's so normal to, when you decide, okay, I don't like the way that I speak to myself, I don't like my internal dialogue, and I'm going to change it, and then you make the attempt to change it, and then the internal dialogue actually turns back on itself.
yeah.
It's like, sure, what's the point, it doesn't work anywhere, it's too much effort, or I just dropped my cup of tea.
You did not just now. No. Do you need to stop and pick it up? We can pause. Do you think?
No,
You didn't drop it on any electricals, did you? Or go in, I'll pause. Will I pause?
no,
Are
it's
you
fine.
sure?
Yeah, it's good. It's just
Oh,
on the ground. It's fine.
okay, okay,
It's wooden floor, so it's fine. It's fine.
okay.
Um, but yeah, it's like the self-talk turns back on itself, which is a natural thing to do,
Yeah,
right? And then you convince yourself out of actually doing it that it's
yeah,
too hard. What's the point? It's not possible. It's
yeah.
silly. It's like I
Again, staying in that comfort zone. And it's like, it's really, sometimes I find that really frustrating with clients because, like, trust me, just try it. Like, that's why I love the 21 days in hypnotherapy, because it's like, if you commit to this, then you commit to the 21 days and they see the change. And it's like, oh shit, why didn't I try this before? It's kind of like that. I told you. And like, not be, it's just kind of like, honestly, if you just change, break that cycle and like try something new, it's reprogramming and rewiring and refiring and like just really like reimagining how you speak to yourself, reimagining how you want to feel about yourself, how you want to treat yourself, and like it actually is that simple, but yeah, it's so difficult to get your head around until you start seeing results, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, like anything new, right? It's
Yeah.
like if I tell you to tonight go and change the hand that you brush your teeth with, it's
Oh
like it's
yeah.
gonna be disjointed and awkward, and your mind's gonna tell you, put it back in the other hand.
Yeah, you'd be so, yeah, tempted to, oh, here, like this is taking too long, I'll flip over. But like what I remember years ago, when I was living in Australia, I teach SPHE, which is social, personal, and health education as well. I teach it here and I taught over there. As well, but we did the Emosho, Dr. Emosho, what's his name? Masuro Emosho. Have you ever heard of his
Yeah.
rice experiment? And it's like the power of your, how you speak to yourself, and the power of your thoughts, and the power of the energy of what you say. So like the experiment, we did it, like I did it with my class, and it was just brilliant because we did it in school, and then some of the kids did it at home. Like they were all supposed to, but I know half of them didn't. But so we had 3 jars of rice, and like every day we spoke loving words to one, and like really hateful, vengeful, like negative, nasty words to another, and then we put the other in a cupboard, like in a press. So it was like love, hate, ignore. And we did this, I can't remember the time, like I think it was definitely over a month, maybe. I can't remember actually the time, but like we did the experiment and we talked to the jar, the loving and whatever. And like honestly, it was crazy because the jar that we spoke lovingly to, the rice barely changed. It was still white rice, like there was a bit of a change. Then obviously, and the hate jar was blacker than black, like rotten, like it was crazy. And then the one we ignored was covered in this fluffy gray white mold, like when we picked it out. So like it was just, the experiment was the power of your words, like the power of your words, you know.
Aoife, you are, do you know how long I've been wanting to actually do that experiment myself? And you're
Oh,
the
you should
first
try
person
it.
that I've ever actually, yeah, I know. I actually set out and I set my jars, and 2 or 3 times I actually went to the shop to get rice and didn't get rice. So I don't know, but it's great to directly speak to somebody that has done it.
Done it, yeah. And
Because
it's seeing is believing as well, like because my kids, the students were like,
yeah,
wow, do you
yeah.
know, and they had to see it to believe it as well, you know what I mean?
Totally, absolutely. We're kind of, yeah, we're programmed that way, right? That's into another kind of topic where we're always waiting for things to improve until we think things will change internally. When I see it, I'll believe it, kind of thing. But it
Yeah,
does work for things like this. But when you spoke that, Aoife, do you know what? My heart just sank because I thought that inner voice that we have that's condescending and critical and judgmental. And it just brought me back to being put in a cupboard. I wasn't put in a cupboard and ignored, but the rice being put in a cupboard and ignored. And that happening to a child, being ignored
yeah,
or being criticized, being blamed, being judged.
yeah.
And like, if that happens to a rice,
Oh,
particle crisis, it's
I
like
know.
what's happening to ourselves and
Yeah,
our soul and our heart. Like my heart just sank to think of a child to experience that.
yeah. And like a child to experience that, but children are more resilient than adults. But an adult, from experiencing that since they were a child and doing it to themselves all these years, so like a child has time to grow out of that, and they're quite, children are way more resilient than adults usually, you know, they let things fall off them. But I'm not dismissing, it does still go in, that's your subconscious, that's where all the adulthood problems start, you know, like that's something in, as a child, so it's there in the back of the mind, it did go in, it's there stored in their subconscious mind. But like years then loading that, like loading on top of that for years upon years upon years upon years. And that's why the concept of the simple concept of talking to yourself positively, it's so hard to do for so many because they're familiar, and their norm is being the polar opposite to themselves, you know, being so critical.
Momentum build up, so much confirmation day in, day out. It's the same story, and you're confirming and you're confirming. And then that becomes your identity. And it feels
Yeah.
like, how can I even escape this, or how can't I? But I love what you said back a couple of minutes ago. You said about that, Eva, just trust me, or even start with that I trust myself, that I can reframe how I speak to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And every day tell yourself, I make a conscious effort. Like we have to make the effort, you know, we have to make that conscious effort.
Yeah. And what could that even look like? I said sometimes you may have to set an alarm to remember initially.
Yeah.
You really do have to set some paramounts in place that help you remember, because it's all in your memory. And if you don't have cues to help you remember, the old memories of the critical internal dialogue just play out. So
Mm.
set those alarms. Ding a ling a ling.
Yeah, and you like you do that with clients. I do that with clients as well. And I always kind of say as well, fake it till you make it. Like, what have you got to lose? Fake it till you make it. And then it becomes a repetition. It becomes a new repetitive cycle of a new behavior that will eventually rewire.
Yeah, that will, yeah, exactly. Over time, the first law of learning is repetition. But I often say to Aoife, sometimes it can be really triggering for people to have that internal talk if it's been really negative for years. So just play with it. Just see how you talk to other people.
Yeah.
And notice, would you ever talk to another person like that? Or would you ever talk to a younger
Your
person like
friend. Yeah.
that? Yeah, just watch it in that way if it's too
Mm.
triggering. Or just say, you know what? I'm just going to watch the themes of how I talk to myself. I'm just going to observe and identify how I am speaking to myself. Maybe if that's just where you are, and
Mm.
that's enough, and that's okay, because it can be really hard to start that shift if it's been so negative for so long.
Mm.
And try it out with other people before you feel comfortable trying it out on yourself as well. There's
Mm.
little different ways to do it, right?
Yeah, and make it a regular occurrence, because like once it's regular, over time it just starts getting easier and easier and more adaptable as well. Like it just, goes in more. What does Penny think of it all? Penny ran away. Penny was like, I've had enough of this.
So overheated with all the self-talk of yeah, of shifting into just, I like that it can be that little bit hard initially because the system's not used to it, but where you really want to get to is just pure love and acceptance and celebratory talk to yourself. It's just like, yeah, just
And
play.
you're not mad. Like people say, first sign of madness is you talking to yourself. No, it's not.
I know. Working in mental health, like really, that's a big thing. You know, you're mad when you're talking to yourself. And then when I started this work down the personal development route, I
Yeah,
learned all the beautiful stuff. It's like, oh my God, you're sane if you're talking to yourself.
yeah.
If you're consciously talking to yourself, you're sane.
And it's like you have to be talking to yourself to be connecting within, to be doing all this inner work. It all starts with how we speak to ourselves, isn't it? Yeah,
That's it. That's it. So
yeah. Well, I think that's it for tonight. What do you reckon?
yeah,
Yeah, cool.
I cheer you with my cup. So it'll
I
be my
know, yeah, you're so
my
sweet. But
cup.
you,
My
you
cup didn't break anyway. My favorite Florida cup. So
oh, thank God it didn't break. Oh, that was good landing. Yeah,
so
yeah,
eat a lot. Big love.
yeah. Iowa.